And we got a new box today. Yep, here it is. Another box was sent to me by a game developer to good old P.O. Box 9046, as you can see here. So I'm actually pretty excited about this one. So let us see what we have today. Well, we have a Dora the Explorer character. We got a Kappa. Or according to this, it's called Moon Kappa. Is that opposed to Moon Zappa? Look up Frank Zappa, you'll get it. We have Monokuma, if he was a gremlin, I guess. And... I think I know who this is. Yep, there he is. The man of the hour himself. And, you know, I assume there's some other stuff in here, too. And, oh, yeah. Yeah, there we go. Neffel, that's his name. Okay, so, yeah, this is D-Spirits. Although if you read the Japanese written below the logo, it actually says Digital Spirits. Although, hilariously enough, if you look at the website, the icon there actually says Dead Spirits. But anyway, this is a new game that was funded on Kickstarter and is going for an official release fairly soon, and it definitely caught my attention. It's definitely one of the first, like, similar to Yu-Gi-Oh games, like a sort of Yu-Gi-Oh-alike games that has caught my attention, and I admit a lot of that has to do with this absolutely charming character design they have going on. I tell you, it is a real treat after a whole big discussion about art and layout in my most recent video to be able to go over a game that clearly has its act together. These designs, I think, are great. They definitely have that very, like, kids, like, anime look to it, but it's sort of impossible to pin down, like, any one source of inspiration in its design. I mean, I see elements of, like, Yokai Watch and Pokemon, and heck, with this guy here, if I asked you what this character was without any context, you'd probably say it was something out of the Backyardigans or Dora the Explorer. Squiggly no squigging, squiggly no squigging, squiggly no squigging. Aw, man. I mean, I expected them to maybe send me one or two plushes. I didn't expect them to send me, like, the full suite of plushes here, although I guess they've seen my couch. But anyway, like I said, D-Spirits is a game that is very similar to Yu-Gi-Oh! It has, like, the similar limited monster zones. In this case, you're limited to 4, and it has things like how the attack and defense stats interact with attack and defense positions. But there are a lot of things that I feel set it apart from Yu-Gi-Oh! One of them is absolutely an emphasis on counterplay. A lot of what happens in this game, I don't think there's going to be, like, solitaire games like there are in Yu-Gi-Oh! In Yu-Gi-Oh! Just so much happens in a single turn. With D-Spirits, there's clearly an emphasis on being able to have a response to whatever kinds of shenanigans your players get up to. So enduring is kind of a neat mechanic. It's actually one that's reflexive, so if a target gets attacked, it can switch to enduring position in response to that attack. So if the creature has had its attack reduced, or if it's experienced some kind of cut, or if it's Batsu, then which has an effect that increases its power when it endures, then that's actually not a bad move to take. And oh man, yeah, like I said, I'm looking at this art, and it's just so charming, so nicely done. It has a very clean look to it. I mean, there's definitely a lot of work going on in the shading and all that, but if you remember when I was talking about how the Munchkin card game was like going for really simple designs but trying to do complex shading, this has a lot of what would have worked better in that series is working here. It has what is called cell shading, which is where the shading, rather than being some kind of like smooth effect transitioned on, instead the shading is like solid blocks of color. This is a common tactic for animation to make it easier to shade things, allows it to be easier to go through cells, and it's become a distinct look in and of itself. Anyway, getting back into it, another thing that's really interesting about this game is that it uses what I call a back-end resource system. Now, most of your games, they use a front-end resource system. This is, you pay a cost in order to get a card into play. These are things like paying some kind of energy cost or needing to attach a certain number of energy cards, a cost that you have to pay before you can use a card. It's a pretty common one. In fact, you could also argue that things like things you can only do once per turn are technically also a limited resource that you pay in the front end. A back-end resource system is one where you put a card into play, but then when that card is removed from play, you pay a sort of penalty. The probably most well-known version of this back-end payment system is Pokemon with the prize cards, where when you lose a Pokemon to damage, your opponent gets to take one of their prize cards and get a step closer to victory. And if you use more powerful Pokemon, some of them give up 2 or even 3 prizes if they're considerably more powerful. So that is probably the most obvious example of a back-end resource system. Another one, there was a game called Dinosaur King, which had each more powerful dinosaurs. When they were defeated, you lost more life points. D-Spirits has something kind of similar going on. Now, if you're familiar with Yu-Gi-Oh, you are familiar with breakthrough damage. That is where when a high attack monster attacks a monster that has a lower attack, while that monster's in attack position, the remaining damage continues on through to the opponent. In the case of D-Spirits, however, each of these cards has a spirit cost, a spirit point cost, and what happens is you don't pay that cost when the creature enters play. Your spirit points are basically your life points. It's when this creature is defeated and sent to the discard pile, defeated in battle specifically. Card effects that remove these don't cost you any spirit points unless a card specifically says it does. And there are several that do, some with really strong effects or like with their own level of like protection or some kind of other cool thing, tend to have an effect where no matter how they leave the battlefield, you pay the SP cost. What this means is that, here's the thing, is in Yu-Gi-Oh, a weak monster is sort of like a hole in your fence that your opponent can just ram damage through. In the case of D-Spirits, the weaker monsters give up fewer spirit points. So a weak creature like this will only give up like 200 spirit points, whereas something big and nasty like Atlas's Gangurt, which I don't have out here, Gangurt, it's this sort of goofy and terrifying catfish dragon thing that has a very, very powerful effect. It's basically Ultimate Tyranno. If you're familiar with the concept, it basically has Ultimate Tyranno's ability, but it gives up way more spirit points when it gets defeated. So what this does is it creates a world where the weaker monsters are not only are they more useful, they're also better at defense. Like I said, there is no breakthrough damage. There is direct damage. For instance, Ga'u has an effect that allows him to attack through all of your opponent's monsters and hit directly. Those lightning bolts aren't just for show. He really is basically sort of this game's version of Watt Giraffe. The SP system actually reminds me of this game called Gundam Extreme Versus, and what it is it's a video game where you could either play as like super powerful ultimate Gundam robots, or you could play as like one of the basic foot soldier robots, but the trick is that each of those units has a score attached to them. This is another example of a back-end resource system, and when that unit is destroyed, that many points gets deducted from the team's stock, and the first team to run out of stock loses. Not only is that a great system that allows all players to participate in the game for the duration of the entire game, but it means that the lower power units can actually be considered viable because they essentially get more chances to win. Like, you could play as the devastating Master Gundam with all of the power that name implies, or you could play as a little transforming tank that's definitely not as powerful as the Master Gundam. But the fact that the transforming tank is half the cost of the Master Gundam, and thus is able to get essentially an extra life, is what makes that competitive. Also, you're not just limited to the spirits. You actually have a separate deck of spirits which can contain up to 15 to 20 spirits, one copy of each. You also have a set of signs, signals and signs deck. You actually have two separate decks here. So you announce which deck you draw from at your turn. Your starting hand can be any quantity from any number of those, and what they do is they have they work like your spell and trap cards, although they work from the hand. There is no setting cards. Instead, cards that can be played on your opponent's turn have the screw attack lightning bolt next to them, indicating that they can be played on your opponent's turn, and they all have various effects. Like, they might change a monster's attack, they might change a monster's attack position, they might allow you to bring a monster into play. Let me see if I can find it. There is... Yeah, here it is, Hopeful Summon. So Hopeful Summon It's a quick effect card, as you can see by the lightning bolt there. It's a quick effect card that allows you to super D-summon, which is this game's version of special summon, a D-Spirit with 700 SP or less from your hand to the field. So Gau, who has his direct attack ability, Gau can only attack directly if he's already been in play for a turn, but if you use Hopeful Summon to effectively flash him into play at the end of your opponent's turn, then he's technically been in play a turn and can attack directly. So there's a lot of those sorts of neat combo ideas. Like, it reminds me of like the first episode of I believe it was it Zexal? Yeah, Yu-Gi-Oh! Zexal, where the hero, he combines Utopia's ability to negate any attack to negate its own attack, so that he could then activate the effect of a card that allows him to double his attack power and attack again in order to win. So those sorts of combos definitely exist in this deck. There is an admittedly slightly out of date how to play video, which uses older versions of our hero Damien and our clear villain Atlas. His name is Atlas. You know, a character named Atlas is a character named Atlas and this sort of thing is generally bad news. But the dark evil shade over the eyes and his silly catfish eyes, fish dragon, definitely makes it clear that he's supposed to be the villain here. Although he's kind of traded hairstyles with Damien. In the old one, Damien had a much more prominent hair, and Damien here is our main character for the show surrounding it. Although it's kind of funny, he has like that little Mandark cut going on in his hair there. What's up with that? But that is something that the people who made the game did tell me about when we had a little chat on Zoom a bit earlier. They actually said that a lot of kids have been looking into this card game, have been drawn in by the characters and think it's interesting. And personally, I think that's wonderful. I feel as though a lot of games have gotten, I guess you could say, gentrified. A lot of games have been kind of taken over by adults who who want everything to be like all serious and all competitive, and have kind of forgotten just kind of the joy and fun of collecting cards again. So to see a game that goes out of its way to specifically appeal to kids, I think is a great thing. Like, it's the same with a lot of video games I've been playing lately. I know I'm going off on a tangent here. But I've met a lot of video games that look like they're supposed to be fun for kids, but then there's like swearing in it out of nowhere, and I think a lot of people have forgotten kind of that pure innocent time, and I'm glad to see that there are games that still grasp onto that. And here we have our two starter decks. Now these are the Kickstarter starter deck first editions. They have, like I said, I like the designs on these characters, and they have a foiling effect. Not sure how well my camera is picking that up, but the whole thing is covered in a foil effect, and it's actually like a nice, it's not like a typical like flap top box that you usually get. It actually has like a nice like opening flap here. In fact, is this magnetic? Let's see. I think it is. Is it magnetic? Easy way to find out. Yep, definitely is. Yep, it's magnetic. Neat. Okay, so this is actually a pretty fancy little container here. I do like seeing boxes that can be reusable. It is wrapped in the shrink wrap. It does mean that the shrink wrap is the only way to see if it's tamper evident, but I don't think, well, I don't know. This seems like the kind of thing that might occasionally be sold in a grocery store, but let us have a look inside. So, of course, we're going to take a look at the Damien deck here, and we have our deck of cards here. We also have a set of sleeves. This seems to be a new trend to include some sleeves in the starter deck. I mean, I like it. I get the idea that to a lot of people, these their cards are very precious to them, so I can understand the desire to sleeve them immediately. I am still personally of the belief that a booster pack is a better addition than sleeves, but you know, to each their own. It's nice that they're being considerate, and the fact that you have like the whole deck and the sleeves, it tells me that the full thing will fit into the box once it's all sleeved up. The real question is, this is sort of a limited starter set. It's 15 D-Spirit cards and 10 support cards, which, if we consult the rules, which are the final thing in here, the rules will tell us how much we actually have on the deck. It can contain up to 20 D-Spirits and 10 to 20 cards. So this is like the minimum size deck, 25 cards. That's a pretty small deck size, all things considered. Now let's take a look at some of these cards here. Let me see if I can get you to see that here, because it's actually has a foiling effect on the card. Yeah, there it is. they actually all say Damien's so-and-so. So this is actually something in the game that I didn't bring up before. I actually didn't know that they were going to do this in the starter deck. If you look at the list on the back, it actually just lists the basic characters here, but these are actually something different. They might have been worth featuring on the back. So what happens is you can only include one copy of each D-Spirit in a deck, but if it has a different name, for instance, a different name counts as a different name. So I could include Damien's Ga'u along with regular Ga'u in the deck. So all of these, and there's Squiggy from before, that plush we got before, and Moon Kappa as well. So we got M-Bird. A lot of these have effects that are similar to their normal counterparts. They're a bit incomparable compared to them. So like regular Frampton can be played from your deck at basically any time. This Frampton basically acts more like it's more like a Karibo, where you can send it from your discard pile and remove it to negate one attack. I'm not sure which version of Karibo can do that, but I don't know if that's Rainbow Karibo or somebody will know which Karibo it is. We have another foil in the case of form of Damien's Knuckle Slice. And like I said, you only get one of each D-Spirit in the deck, but you technically only need one of each D-Spirit, so you buy one starter deck and you're done. I know that's a common criticism of like Yu-Gi-Oh! A criticism that I've leveled at a few games where you have to buy several copies of something to get everything, but no, you get everything in the deck. Spirit Buff, limit 3, you get 3. Rebirth, limit 2, you get 2. Strike Again, limit 3, you get 3. Swaparoo, limit 4, you get 2. Select one D-Spirit on the field and swap its power and endurance stats. So that's so there are a lot of tricks and forms of interaction to deal with troublesome cards. Although this one I think might need a bit of clarification. Damien's Ga'u here. Damien's Ga'u has the effect that if your opponent's spirit spaces are full at any time, Damien's Ga'u can be super desummoned from your hand or squad and can attack your opponent's SP directly. So this is an ability that I think is going to need a little bit of clarification. So it says that the effect allows it to be summoned and attack directly. Does that mean it is summoned already attacking? Can I do that on my opponent's turn, summon it already attacking? Or is its ability to attack directly an independent effect? That I think is going to need some clarification. But otherwise, you know, it's a pretty straightforward deck, and aside from Swaparoo, I don't know, do you get Swaparoo in this deck as well? Yeah, you get 2 Swaparoos in the Atlas deck as well, so between this and an Atlas deck, you get all the Swaparoos you could ask for. Although, one type of card that is conspicuously absent from this deck is any Realm cards. I didn't talk about these before. What a Realm card does is it's basically like a Stadium card in Pokemon, where you have one Realm card in play, and it acts as a field card. It has an effect that benefits both players while it's in play. And if you play a new one, it gets rid of the old one. But it has a trick where, a bit like Monopoly, you have to offer to pay an amount of life points in order to get it into play. So this sort of turns into an auction, kind of like with Monopoly, where you volunteer to bid higher and higher amounts of spirit points until somebody blinks. So basically your opponent can pay a ton of life points to keep your card from coming into play. Something else I forgot to mention, spirit points actually have a lot of uses as well. You can also use, you can spend 500 spirit points during the draw step to draw 2 cards instead of 1. That's an interesting trick. Another one is Soul Exchange. If you already have a spirit in play, you can return that card to your hand in order to play a fresh one. Now, I couldn't do that to, for example, have Damien's Ga'u attacked, then Spirit Exchange to use his effect again, because that would be outside of the battle step. But the regular form of Frampton, if I get one in the booster packs, is a prime candidate for Soul Exchange, because Soul Exchange does not count against your one summon for the turn. You get one regular spirit summon for the turn, just like with Yu-Gi-Oh! But if you super desummon something, then you can Soul Exchange anything that's been in play for a turn. So you could not Soul Exchange Damien's Ga'u. You could Soul Exchange him on a later turn to reuse his effect, but not on the same turn. It looks like they're trying to avoid any kind of infinite loop you can get. Although it's something to keep an eye on. Chef's Kitchen is another one to keep an eye on too. When I was speaking of realm cards, this is one where normally you pay the SP when you lose with the battle. In the case of Chef's Kitchen, you gain the SP instead, and this is a card that I think we need to look out for. There are definitely ways to work around this card. You could attempt to play your own realm card, although since this is a life gain realm card, that might be difficult to outbid your opponent on. There are cards that destroy realm cards, there are cards that destroy spirit cards, there are cards that can attack directly. So as long as there's enough ways to get around pretty much anything that can be built, there's a pretty good chance for balance here. So yeah, that's a neat little bit of kit. Although I did notice that the current copy of the rulebook, it is a bit blurry on the inside. I don't know if this is because the black got tied in with the color printing. I detailed that before, but the text is a bit, it's a bit off. I imagine this is something that they're going to be fixing in later releases. They've already told me a few things that they're working on. And then finally we have the cube. This is the large thing that was sent along with everything else. It's a nice big, it's a nice, pretty well proportioned box. It's got a lot of the artwork around the sides here. We got Ga'u, we got Mephil, we got the Gargoyle. I'm not sure what this one is. Kind of reminds me of XJ9 from My Life as a Teenage Robot. But the idea is that this is like a very special first edition set, and what it does is it contains. It looks like in design like it's supposed to be like a half booster, a half box. I've described these before, in that they tend to contain fewer boosters than an actual. Set, and instead opt to have like fewer boosters but more stuff to do. And yes, it does contain a set of rules in it, and of course a box topper. Let's take a look at the box topper. There we go. There's a little tab on the side there. Oh. Yeah, not very easy to open, is it? Okay. Let's have a look there. Is this All-Star Ga'u? Let's see what we got here. It is Pyrunt. Oh, it's a little pirate man. 650, 1300. Each time Pyrunt successfully destroys a D spirit, it gains half of their attack power. This effect lasts until Pyrunt leaves the field. So this is going to be somebody you're going to have to rip out the extra pieces of paper to throw little pluses onto in order to get them to work. But anyway, that's kind of neat. So it gains. So each one has a type. Like Pyrunt here is a sort of a dark type. You can see like the little logo on there, and that is their basic type. And there are creatures that it has an advantage against. For example, this one, I believe this is technology, is this sort of vector cube here. So it gets plus 2,000 either attack or defense in combat against one of these types of critters. So there are some cards that mention different types. Like I said, the one about the sky mentioned the food types. It might not be a bad idea to include those icons next to the word as they are related. Not a bad thing to include. Now, as for the rest of the cube's contents, inside we have not 10, but 20 booster packs from the Control the Soul introductory set. So this is way more than your typical half booster. In fact, it's more than some full booster boxes. 20 is a lot, so I'm not going to be opening it for this video. I might be opening it for a later video, so we're going to see what sorts of fun things we can get in here. Although there is one little bit of criticism I have to make about this box. It is nice to have a box with like lots of art and lots of contents and stuff like that, but the problem is if you're going to go out of your way to make like a nice like box like this, why not make it large enough to act as very effective card storage? For example, if we were to, for instance, take a look at the old Legend of the Five Rings booster boxes. Now these are also made out of a nice cardboard. However, you'll see if we compare that this Legend of the Five Rings box is a bit wider. Even after I remove the top, it is considerably wider, which means it is wide enough to store a bunch of the cards inside. So that might be the one thing I'd try to advocate more on the cube if they do a re-release, is to see if they could figure out how to tweak the dimensions just so slightly so that it can stash more stuff. Otherwise, always fun to see like a big push for like better art and things like that. Have a nice thing that looks good on a shelf or good behind a display case. Always fun to see that sort of thing. And so that is a look at D-Spirits. I highly doubt that this is the last we are going to see of it. I mean, there are some obvious questions regarding balance. For example, since the Signs and Signals cards and the Spirit cards go into separate decks, for example, am I allowed to put each one in different colored sleeves so that I can keep them organized? I actually discussed this with some of the people working on their game. Their stance currently is no, and their explanation was that it's important for players to remember how many cards get drawn from each deck and to calculate that accordingly in case specific cards are there. And my counter argument is, not only does allowing different types of sleeves help you keep things organized, such as with Yu-Gi-Oh's extra deck, which I believe is also allowed to do separate sleeves for extra deck cards, but it also prevents a ruined game state, because what would happen if one of my Signs and Signals cards accidentally gets shuffled into my Spirit deck and I draw that from my Spirit deck during my turn? That's a destroyed game state. Although at the time I draw the card, only I would know that, so it would kind of run a bit on the honor system, or my opponent will only figure out that the mistake has happened long afterwards. So honestly, I feel that allowing players to do two different types of sleeves would be would stop and prevent more arguments than it would settle. But that said, that's a look at D-Spirits. I'm definitely going to do a separate video where I open the contents of the cube. But I honestly think it is a game with tremendous potential. Like I said, I love the appealing character designs. I'm glad they sent me all the plushies. Gao is definitely gonna join the club on the back of the couch for a while. In fact, I have another one from the couch running support over here, keeping this guy up, Nephil up. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how the card game gets maintained. Like I said, a lot of what's going on is a heavy use of counterplay, a lot of cards that specifically interact with cards that your opponent has played, moves your opponent might make. A lot of cool, unexpected stuff. Like I said, there's a card that is basically like Effect Veiler that's like a shoe-in for any deck. So even though it says the minimum is 15, I imagine a lot of people are going to run more than 15 just to make sure that they can include that. There's a lot of cool stuff in there. There's a few Pankratops I've seen. There's a few Floodgates I've seen. So it looks like there's going to be a lot of interesting stuff. There actually is a side deck in this game. The game has a sideboard, and a funny thing about the sideboard in this game, it's something I forgot to mention. There's a lot of things I forgot to mention. I'm just kind of excited. You do have a sideboard in this game. However, the sideboard also doubles as an extra deck in certain cases. There are cards that can summon themselves from the sideboard or have effects from the sideboard during the game. So that is definitely going to be an interesting thing to play around with, because you do have that always reliable sideboard pull, but that comes at the cost of you being able to put in some more flexible cards, like some more reliable Floodgates or Arena Destruction or things like that. So it's a game that's designed to be constantly, to have you constantly, you know, weaving around your opponent to try to get the upper hand. And I honestly think that's going to be a very good, very stimulating game experience. And like I said, it's been drawing a lot of kids. I hope the kids who have been playing it have been having fun. There's already a very clear span between, there are, you know, the go all in strategies, like with the Gangert, who has a really high cost and can do a lot of cool stuff, versus winning with the smaller spirits. And both of those strategies definitely have their viable points and their highs and lows. So it's already showing a pretty diverse form of play styles, even in the time it's been out. So it's definitely a game worth keeping your eyes on. So yeah, that is a look at D-Spirits, and until next time, this is Kohdok signing off.